Hi, I'm Haren, and today I'm going to show you how to paper piece using the techniques that are in my book. Now, the foundations will all be provided for you. You can go to the Landauer Corporation website and download them for free in the multiples you need to make the quilt. I want to go over the numbering system with you because we've done things to these templates to make it much easier. So if you did not like paper piecing before, we're hoping that the changes that we've made in the technique will make it something that everyone loves. So when you are doing paper piecing, you actually sew through a piece of paper and the fabric is on the bottom. So your seam allowance isn't as important because where you sew on these lines is determining what the finished block will look like. On a traditional paper piecing block, you normally start in the center or at a corner because you have to add the pieces of the block in sequence, so you are always going out, because once you sew a seam, the fabric has to go in that direction. So in this particular case, this is a perfect example of a paper piecing block. We would start with number 1, add 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so forth. I always write the instructions so you are adding opposite sides, and because many times then you can sew and add both of those pieces to the center block, and you only have to press and trim once. So I'm going to show you what the foundations would look like. In the quilt, all of the blocks are set on point. So to remind you of that and to make sure that you don't fussy cut the center in a way that wouldn't look as nice if it was set on point, we have actually printed all of the numbers and letters on point because that is the way the block will appear in your quilt. So the center is fussy cut, and we have put dashed horizontal, vertical, and diagonal lines in that center square. Those are to help you place it on the design in the fabric so you can keep everything square. And as you notice in this case, I use those lines to center this up, so this particular design would be in the center of that center square. Once you have that placed, this is number 1, so that is the first piece you add. Then you would sew 2, then 3, then 4, and 5. So the numbering system tells you what order you add the triangles. The parens have letters in them. That is the color of fabric. So in this particular case, this is fussy cut fabric, this is bronze, this is light blue, etc. If you are using different fabrics, you would just mark those out and make your own notes accordingly. So this is very easy to do. This has to be the exact size of your finished block. So in this book, everything is 6-inch blocks, so this would be trimmed right now to 6 inches, and you would just cut it right on that black line all the way around to begin sewing. This is my favorite foundation paper. There are many foundation papers on the market that are used to print your foundations on, and they are usually a very thin paper that is easy to tear away without doing any damage to your sewing, so you don't actually tear out any seams. This is Simple Foundations by C&T, and I really like it because it's thin and it's also translucent. And so it's very easy to fussy cut because you can actually see right through this paper. So I use this for all of my paper piecing needs. Now, in some cases, we combine paper piecing and pieced applique. So we need to have applique templates. These would be the templates that would appear in the book. This is template A, which means this rambler block only has one applique. They will be printed in the multiples you need, and the name of the block is on the templates. The stars indicate the sides that are turned when you are preparing the appliques, and the dash line is there in case you want to fussy cut that segment. That if I want to fussy cut the fabric for this applique, that gives me a line from top to bottom that I could line up on print in the fabric. These templates up here are numbered, and this is template 1, which means it is the fussy cut template for that center square. and it has the dashed lines going horizontal, vertically, and diagonally, just like this foundation for the center square. And see right here? So this is the exact same size, exact same shape with the exact same markings as this is. So I can take and cut this out of the fabric and place it directly on here, and my fussy cut unit will be centered right in that center square. There are several tools that you can use to paper piece, and one of the most popular is the add-a-quarter ruler. It comes in several different lengths, 6, 12, and 18 inches, and it has a lip right here. This lip is 1/4 of an inch wide, and so if I want to trim my fabric, I can put it against a straight edge. In this case, I'm just going to use the roller to show you, but see how it hits against there, and it gives me a perfect 1/4 inch, and I trim my fabric right with the edge of this acrylic ruler. I use this when I'm paper piecing, but sometimes I don't have that available, and if I don't, I use the Creative Grids rulers. Most of them have a 1/4 inch grip around the entire outside edge, and this grips the paper and the fabric and gives me the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance I need, so it's very easy for me to lay that on the edge of the fabric and trim my 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So if I don't have the add-a-quarter, I use the, many times I'll just pick up a ruler with a 1/4 of an inch seam and use that. If the blocks have pieced applique elements to them, this is the brand of freezer paper I like to use. It's by C. Jenkins. There's 50 sheets to a pack, and it's a heavier weight freezer paper than the rolls that you buy at the grocery store. It comes in 8.5 by 11 sheets. The templates that you'll be using are in 8.5 by 11 sheets, so it's a very fast and simple process to take the printed copy, put it face down on the ironing board, so if there's any water in your iron, it's not going to spit and run the ink on your templates. Then you take the waxy side of the freezer paper, put them right sides together, and simply press them together. We want our templates to be 2 layers of paper because it makes it much easier to turn the sides, and it also makes it easier to remove the templates because it's a thicker template, it's heavier, and it doesn't tear when you remove it, so you can actually reuse those templates if you would like to. When you're pressing, it is better to use a dry iron because a dry iron doesn't create any bubbles. Sometimes if you iron the paper with steam or water in your iron, it will bubble the paper because of the steam. Now that normally doesn't bother me, and it's not going to really affect the templates, and I will use them anyway, but I prefer to have a dry iron when I'm doing this process. When I begin paper piecing, I cut out the beginning foundation, and then I look at the foundation and I layer all my fabrics from start to finish in order that they are on the template. So in this case, I go backward. The 21, 20, 19, and 18 are bronze triangles. And the book gives you the cutting instructions for all of these. If you are an experienced paper piecer, you may not want to use those cutting instructions. But I prefer to do it because, as you can see with these triangles, we know that it is large enough to cover that space, so you don't have to worry about the piece being too small when you flip it back over the template. And also, I have cut them so this is on the straight of grain, so the entire outside edge of all of your blocks will be on the straight of grain, and you won't have any distortion because you end up with bias edges on the outside. So in this case, 21, 20, 19, and 18 are all triangles, so I'm going to lay those on the bottom. 17, 16, 15, and 14 are blue rectangles, so I need 4 of those. And at this point, I normally lay these all out on a paper plate, so I'm ready to sew each foundation as I go. And I normally do a lot of my rotary cutting during the day when I have better lighting, and I'm more alert. And as I'm placing these, I also make sure that the fabric is always right side up. The reason I do this is that sometimes on some fabrics it is hard to see which is the right and wrong side, and if you have daylight it's usually a lot easier to do that. So I know when I'm picking them up that everything is right side up. So now I have all of these pieces, and the next four are 13, 12, 11, and 10, which again are 4 bronze triangles. So I'm going to place those. Then I have 4 more rectangles of the blue. And you notice that those are a smaller size because this is a smaller unit. Okay. And then 5, 4, 3, and 2 are 4 more bronze triangles, so I put those on top. Now I'm going to show you how to cut out that fussy cut unit. When I am preparing those templates to use in my project, I actually did that fussy cut on the paper piecing foundation because you saw that it was translucent, so I can see through this, and I can actually leave this in my foundation while I'm doing the entire paper piecing process. So all I did was fold this on the vertical line and matched it to the design in the fabric. And I put a dab of glue there and place this. Now I'm just going to take and rotary cut 1/4 inch away around the entire outside edge. And that is going to give me a piece that looks like this. So I have my center square. This is the exact size that will show in the block. I've trimmed it 1/4 inch away. And see how that design is centered exactly there? Now this block has 4 templates. And after it is all paper pieced, then we will have these as applique elements to the finished block. So I want to have these prepared too, so when I have all of the elements ready for the block, when I am done paper piecing, I'm done with the block. So I'm going to show you how to prepare your appliques now too. So this piece of fabric has a straight edge on this side, and since all of the templates are straight edges, I take a ruler and I place it so that 1/4 inch line that is on the Creative Grids ruler is right along this edge. So I know I'm going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the bottom because see, the templates are starred if the edges are turned. If they are not turned, that means it is placed on an outside edge of a block, and that edge is going to be caught in the seam allowance when it is sewn together. So therefore I need an accurate 1/4 inch at the bottom. So I'll put a dab of glue on those. And place them right next to the ruler, which is going to guarantee that I have a 1/4 inch seam at the bottom, and I don't have to bother trimming it later to get that accurate 1/4 inch. Now we need a 1/4 inch seam allowance around each of these templates, and your finger is about 1/2 inch wide. So I take my finger and place it between the templates, and that guarantees that I'm giving myself enough room to have a seam allowance around each piece. Now these are triangles, so I'm going to be coming down at an angle, so I normally give myself a little bit more room, or sometimes 2 fingers to make sure, but if the angle is cut off a little bit, that's going to be in the seam allowance and it's not going to affect the finished block. So now that I have that glued in place, I would continue and do all 4. Then I would just move this up so the 1/4 inch lines on the ruler would be on the edge of the template, and I would rotary cut this and cut out every one of those templates, and it goes very quickly because I can cut out 2 adjoining sides at the same time. Here are 3 that are already turned, and you can see that this one, because of the distance between the templates, that little point is cut off. It doesn't matter at all because it's well into the seam allowance and it's not going to hurt anything. Here is one that is trimmed a 1/4 inch away on all sides. I'm going to take a glue stick and run glue on the template and on the fabric and turn this edge. And when I get to this top part, I'm going to fold the fabric over a little bit where there isn't a template, so when I turn it this way, that fabric will fall below this template, and I won't have a little tail sticking out that's going to come back to haunt me later. So you fold that over, and with that double layer of paper, see how easy that is? So I get a perfect crisp edge, and when this is incorporated into your finished block, no one will know that you didn't do all of that intricate piecing, and you just appliqued this on top. Now I'm going to show you how to place this on your paper piecing foundation. So this is our fussy cut unit that we've prepared. We have the foundation on our paper plate, and you can see through this translucent paper that right there it is. And so I need to take this and place it so the fabric is right sides up on the wrong side of the paper. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue on this. And since this is out of the foundation paper, I can leave this in as I continue to paper piece, and we'll take it out when the block is totally complete. So I'm going to pull this back a little bit because I'm going to center it exactly over the lines on that square, and I have a perfect number one positioned right in place. Now, if you are not going to use a fussy cut center, then we need to put a fabric there and trim it down to the appropriate size, because in this case, this was already trimmed and it was made to fit exactly on that position. If we were using a plain fabric, then we would have to take a foundation and glue a square to it, and then we'll trim it on all four sides. So our seam allowance is determined, and we'll trim that fabric, and then we'll continue the process.
Oh boy.
So when we're doing something like this, and if we wanted to do blue fabric in here, so there would only be two different fabrics, I cut the square approximately an inch larger than this because I want a little bit of wiggle room, and so I can trim this down to the exact size. So I'm going to turn this over, put a dab of glue on the wrong side. Remember, the first piece is always placed right side up, and I like to fold this in half because we do have that diagonal line. So see, all I have to do is place the fold on here and make sure it extends out on both sides about a ½ inch, flip it over, and I've positioned that piece. Now, I'm going to turn my board over just so I can show you how to trim this. So I'm going to take this, and to trim this down to size and to use the add-a-quarter ruler, you need some kind of a straight edge. It doesn't matter what it is. This is just the back of a notebook that I cut off to make sure that I had a straight edge. You can use index cards, poster board, anything, you know, the little handouts that you throw away that come in magazines. It doesn't really matter. You just need a crisp edge that the ruler can hit against to guarantee that you have that ½ inch seam allowance. So in this case, I know that fabric is sewed to all four sides of those squares of the, or all triangles are sewn to all four sides of the center square. So I am going to trim all four sides at once. So I'm going to put it here and pull it back to crease that paper, and take the add-a-quarter ruler and hit it against that edge and trim all four sides of this block. Many of you may not be familiar with this method of paper piecing. A lot of people do not trim the seam allowance till after they've sewn the next piece, but I really like doing this because it doesn't waste as much fabric, and it gives a much better finished look to the block as I'm sewing. So see, now when you look at this, I know exactly where my next piece should be placed, And this square of fabric is now exactly 1/4 of an inch larger than this piece. So if I wasn't fussy cutting, now this center is the exact same size as this one, and I could continue the process. So I'm going to use the fussy cut center because I really like the look of this, but if you're ever using plain fabric, you know how to get started. So now I have my stack in the order that they need to be added, so there's never any question. And what I need to do is add piece number 2 here, which is a bronze triangle on this corner, and as you notice, I can do opposite sides at the same time. So I'm going to flip this over, and since it's translucent, I can still see my numbering system through there. And I normally put a dab of glue in the seam allowance at each end so that this doesn't flip back when I'm sewing. And these are oversized. So I just try to center it, and since this was fussy cut, see, I can take that point of the triangle and put it right there, and it's going to stick beautifully. Now, since this is 1/4 of an inch away from this point, I can also add the other side at the same time, so I can sew twice and press and trim once. So it's going to save some time. And now my point is covered here, but I can see by the points out there that that is pretty much centered, and I'm going to be fine. And this is held in position. So it would be just like traditional sewing, because see, now these are right sides together, but I'm not going to see that because I'm going to sew from this side and insert my needle here and sew from here to here and here to here. Now you can use a fine needle such as a 70 if you'd like. You can adjust your seam length because some people do that and think it's easier to remove the paper. I found when I use the vellum I can use my standard default stitch length on my sewing machine, and it's not an issue at all. You do not sew past this, but you don't have to backstitch or anything, because I don't want to sew past this or else it is sewing the paper to the fabric below that I need to trim off, and I'm not going to be able to fold the template out of the way. So you just sew from here to here and here to here. So I'm going to do that now. Now this machine has a button here that cuts my threads every seam I sew, which is really nice for paper piecing. But as you can see, I sewed from here to here and here to here. And so I've literally just sewn these 2 triangles into position, and now I'm going to go and press those open right here.